Welcome to The Last 50 Feet, the podcast about what happens when autonomous vehicles actually arrive at the curb. Every week, we get into what is moving in autonomous commerce, what's stalling, and who's building what next. No fluff, all signal, and we keep it brief. That's our thing. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Last 50 Feet, episode number 4. CEO Ben Seidel, myself, and we have today with us a very special guest, Ethan McKenna. Ethan, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Are we wrapping up finals? Have finals wrapped up? Where are we in the term here?
In the heat of finals right now. Got a couple left, so it's a busy week, but it's been good.
Oh my gosh, man! How many more weeks do you have until freedom?
About 1 week from today, actually. So.
Oh my gosh!
Nice.
And
yeah.
we'll get into this today, but actually it's not necessarily freedom, although we'll let you coin whatever that's going to be this summer. But I know you have some exciting plans. I think the goal today is obviously to rip into who you are, get a little backstory, and then what it is you've built, and obviously how you've globbed on, and you've helped us actually quite a bit over the past 6 or so months. So I think let's start. Just give us a quick backstory of you, and then we'll dive into it here a little bit.
Yeah. So my name's Ethan McKenna. I was born and lived in Austin my entire life. I've always been into technology and kind of the frontier of what's happening with tech. And so when I heard about autonomous vehicles back in 2018, I think I heard about Waymo. I was instantly really interested in what they were doing. But at the time, they were just in Phoenix doing their trials there. So it wasn't really something I could actually use. But I had Waymo at the back of my head for a long time. And then they announced in 2023, I think, that they were coming to Austin. And so I signed up for the wait list immediately and was super excited. And then in October of 2024, they started trialing. And so I got access. And I took my first ride to downtown near the Capitol, and I was just super blown away by the technology. I knew that what Waymo was doing and just like the industry in general was going to be the future. And so ever since then, I've just been super excited about autonomy and trying to be involved however I can. So when Tesla then came into Austin last year, that kind of accelerated my interest as I saw that there was multiple players and there wasn't really much info about what specifically was happening. And so that's kind of just going into my work, why I made Robotaxi Tracker. I saw that there was kind of a disconnect between what companies were saying and what the public was seeing and like what the actual results of autonomy was. So I just kind of fueled my interest in autonomy into that project.
So what is, let's be specific. What is the Robotaxi Tracker? I mean, obviously the name is a bit self-explanatory, but like walk us through what you did and kind of what it's doing today.
Yeah, so when the initial kind of data gap that I noticed whenever Waymo and then Tesla got into Austin is that there was a varying number of people who were saying different fleet estimates on like how many cars were actually in service. So I knew that that license plates were a great way to be able to kind of uniquely identify individual vehicles. And so initially at the start, I was looking at Tesla's Pilot and just kind of manually logging every individual vehicle that I could find. Obviously that wasn't scalable. And so since then, I've kind of found a lot of different automated ways to continue to expand that. So traffic cameras, building systems, kind of reverse engineer the apps to find more info and things like that. And since then, the platform's kind of turned into more, instead of just tracking fleet, we're kind of doing all kinds of stuff now, like looking at wait times, finding other publicly available sources like the NHTSA crash logs, and normalizing that data and making it easier to read. And it all kind of ties together at just giving the public a look at what's happening with autonomy in a way that's easy to understand, isn't obfuscated, or in the case of like NHTSA records, like super hard to read. So just kind of making it in one centralized place that's easy to read, easy to understand, and just kind of easy to track what's happening with the industry.
A lot of journalists and different industry experts use the site, right, to kind of get a quick grasp on what's happening in various localities.
Yeah, it's definitely it's been pretty. I when I initially built the site, it was mostly just kind of as a hobby thing. I personally wanted to understand and track this, and initially at first there wasn't much traction, but I think there was clearly a data gap there that people were looking for. And so after a couple of months, whenever I had more systems in place and the numbers were more accurate, and started taking off. And I think as people were reporting on Tesla's pilot in Austin, and then eventually some of the other areas, they wanted to include in the reporting like what the actual deployment looked like, and fleet count is like the most obvious way. So New York Times, Business Insider, most of the major reporting around it usually includes Robotaxi Tracker when they're talking about like fleet numbers and things like that.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I've been like a lot of people on X and in the industry have been very keen on looking at the specific percentage of unsupervised robotaxi versus supervised in Austin. I think that's one of the leading indicators for Tesla's FSD progress widely, but also, you know, the commercial robotaxi product and service that they're rolling out. That percentage is pretty much, at least from what I understand, only your website is giving anyone any indication. Again, it's not 100% accurate. It's self-reported, but like you've got the only source of information on that specific metric, and I think it's fascinating that metric for those who are kind of in the know and tracking this deeply. I would say all eyes are on that, even from Wall Street to day traders to anyone tracking the Tesla stock. That specific, very nuanced edge case number that's coming out on your website is, I think, a fascinating stat amongst hundreds that you've got on there. I mean, I think even just the simple geofences from the different companies and the different cities is extremely helpful. I used it yesterday on a call with a major property group, and was kind of showcasing where the Waymo geofence was in different cities, and it allowed us to have a pretty quick conversation about that. So I think there's just a lot of utility for people. So kudos, man, for pulling this all together and helping, I think, bring some sanity to the conversation. Otherwise it kind of devolves oftentimes into he said, she said, and opinions, which is of course no good for the state of the industry today, where there needs to be as much factual content as possible and conversations around true data and facts, as opposed to, you know, I think I would spend the last couple of years where you've got certain camps in the AV community, whether it's LiDAR versus vision only, and Waymo versus Tesla, and, you know, traditional OEMs versus these new AV companies. There's so many, I think, factions that are looking at this data, and before it existed, we're just yelling at each other, I would say, more or less. But your site has certainly helped, I think, bring some sanity to the conversation. So it's been awesome.
You know, there were a number of, I think there are still a number of other sites, not including the one that I tried to build before.
Wah, wah.
Yeah. Do the noise, wah, 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 wah. Not
it's
good. Not
that one, actually.
Yeah, not good.
It's the wah, wah.
Wah, wah, wah.
I'll see if I can put it on.
What did you get right? And we won't even put mine into the equation here, because I think I actually got everything wrong. But like, when you started to concept this, what do you think it is that you got right over some of the other trackers that were out there?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think one aspect is building something that has an easy to use interface that I think is approachable by just the general public. There's some like super great tools that feel kind of more researchy, or like have maybe some pilots or other services that aren't really applicable to a lot of people yet. So one thing that I really think about when I was approaching building the site was keeping it as simple as possible, like streamlining the features, making it something that's like approachable just to the average person who's trying to find this data, while also at the same time like providing a lot of helpful data. So I think the other aspect was I don't think anyone's doing like the fleet tracking like what my site's currently doing. It's a really hard problem. It's not something I even can do super accurately. There's no way to like deterministically find like every single vehicle. So you kind of have to get a lot of different hacking methods together, like both crowd reporting and then like getting some cameras online, and then like also creating like this ride sync system that I did that allows people to like auto import all their rides that include license plate numbers. So I think combining some of the technology that I had to like develop to get it to be somewhat accurate, and then combining that with making it an approachable user interface, and then also like marketing it on X and just kind of like making it available, easily screenshotable. Like you'll see screenshots of like people posting like the graphs and things like that. I think all of those just kind of combined together at the right moment to make it one of the biggest.
Yeah, I think that's pretty similar to your process too, right, Cam? Cam got a free trial on Manus, I think, and was like, "Hey, check this out."
I got to mapbox.com and was like, I think we're done here.
Have you seen Manus before?
I have,
yeah. He built your website in about 14 seconds with a free trial.
And as you can imagine, we got about 14 seconds worth of value.
It was amazing.
That was it.
And then I said, I think I know a guy on X who actually knows how to do this.
Let me reach out.
So it's been awesome to work with you. We've been at Autolane an early sponsor of your work. So thanks for allowing us to be a part of the project in a small way. We've been happy to support, and I think the site has a really great future as more and more autonomous vehicle companies enter into the fray, and more cities come online, and the fleet size, of course, is going to grow for each one of these companies in every city. I think the site is destined to be a pretty big industry contributor if it's not already. But I think your traffic and attention is only going to go up from here. So super exciting. And then I think you had another question, Cam.
Ethan, when did you launch the tracker? What was the day? Do you remember specifically?
I think I launched like the first version in August, like early August, around when like Tesla was starting to like expand the number of vehicles, and people were kind of curious about like how many exactly there were.
Okay. And then fast forward us to when something very exciting happened with Tesla itself, and fill us in on what's happening with you and them this summer.
Oh, we lost our guy.
I couldn't tell if he was like disappointed in the question. Or... Producer Kyle, are you there?
I'm here. Did we lose him?
Yeah.
Still says he's here.
Hello?
Oh, we can hear you now.
I think we dropped off for a second.
He's back.
He's back.
I was asking you to fast forward to today. How many months was it until Tesla reached out, and then fill us in on what's happening with them moving forward?
Yeah, so like I said, I originally created the site in August. There wasn't really much work on it, I think, until it really picked up like in the October, November timeframe. And then from there, it really started to gain some traction. And then I think December, the day after Christmas in December, someone from Tesla who's like pretty senior leadership reached out to me and was like, "We really like the work you're doing. Like, would you consider joining Tesla?" Which was very surprising. I was definitely not expecting that. And so, talked back and forth with them for a while. And so, I'm excited to be joining Tesla this summer as an intern, to be working on some of the Robotaxi stuff, doing kind of similar work to what I've done with the tracker, but obviously internally. So really looking forward to that.
You built it and they came. Folks, do you hear how that works out there? That's super exciting, man. Congratulations. Going back to the tracker, what is some of the most interesting data that you feel like you've discovered since launching? Just like watching it all yourself, building it into the tool. What are some of the more interesting pieces of info?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff. I think one of the most fun data sources that I've worked on is, so in Austin, there's close to 1,000 traffic cameras that are publicly accessible. So I've been having fun with those. I like train some machine learning models to like find Waymos like within those images and then like run that every 5 minutes. So there's been some cool things that I've discovered with that. Like whenever there was a winter storm in Austin, I was able to figure out exactly like what the procedures are around like when they start pulling vehicles off the road and when they bring them back in. And then same for Tesla, like I could use the ETA data that I've reverse engineered from their app to understand like when they're pulling vehicles for weather incidents or things like that. And then also a fun thing that like I just saw this morning is I like track the cameras that are outside of the current service area so I can like see when they're going to start expanding. So I've been seeing some Waymos in West Austin. So I think a little sneak peek there.
Wow.
There's going to be a service area increase in West Austin soon. So it's been fun to kind of like get a little sneak peek of what's happening behind the scenes.
That's super cool. I hadn't
So
considered
exciting.
that. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. So when you started this project, it was kind of like a side project, right? You were just, I'm going to start cobbling together this information. At what point did you start to get the feeling that this might be something bigger than a little side project?
I think it was like in the November timeframe, or maybe December, whenever I really started, like it really started picking up on X. Like a lot of the big accounts there were like actually starting to use it as a data source. And then I was getting like a ton of emails from different reporters, like asking for me to like comment on things. And that was like really shocking because I've never had something like that happen before. And so I think there wasn't a specific moment, just during that time frame when it picked up from just something as I was doing like as a side project to something that I was getting like questions about every day, and people were like spamming my DMs asking for new features and reporting bugs and things like that. It was a really surreal moment to like experience it go beyond me, and this was like something that the general public and people really wanted, like more data. So it was a pretty exciting moment for sure.
You're like the Mark Zuckerberg of AV data. You're staying in school though, right?
Yes.
You're
Yeah,
staying in
for
school?
For now.
Now, see? You heard it here first.
Wow.
You left the door open.
So just an internship this summer, nothing planned after that, but going back to school in the fall.
For now, yeah. They wanted me to like start like the next week when they reached out to me, but I decided to not drop out. So it's just an internship for now.
Wow. So when people reach out, like some of those specific features, what do you have planned for the site, like for the next, call it 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just continuing to automate more of the processes to get the data more accurate and scalable, because it's a big year for AVs. Waymo is going to be in 20 plus cities. Tesla is going to be like in a handful of states. There is so much expansion that it will really require me to continue to automate a lot of the processes so that things are running smoothly across all the service areas. So that's a big thing. And I've started to get some work done with that, with like Ride Sync, where you can sign into like your Tesla account currently and Waymo soon. And it like syncs all your rides and will report any new plates like that you discover automatically. And so that's been a big success, and it's exciting. Like I've seen that work in Dallas and Houston without me having to like push any updates to the app or things like that. Those vehicles automatically got discovered. So continuing to scale efforts like that. And then there's just a lot of other ways to find more data. Like there's like public requests that I think I can send into some states to get more data from companies. So I'm looking into stuff like that. And then continuing to build new technology to like automate the discovering new service area polygons and things like that. So there's just a lot of different technological pieces that I think will continue to make the system more scalable, and then continuing to scale the existing features to work better as there's like 20 plus regions. So it's definitely an exciting time.
Fast forward 5 years from today. What's your most scalding hot take about how autonomous vehicles will look and impact society in 5 years?
Ooh, 5 years is a long time. I think there's 5 years from now, I think there's probably a chance that like some cities will start like banning human driving, like within at least city centers. which is definitely a very controversial thing because people like having their own autonomy personally, like being able to drive themselves. But I think from a safety case, it's going to become overwhelmingly the case that as AVs are proven to be safer, and I mean, they already have been, like, it's just not going to make sense to allow human-driven cars when there's so many like vulnerable road users around and things like that. So I guess my take is that we'll start to see cities banning human-driven cars in some
I'll
regions.
move to that city, whatever it is. I've been saying the same thing. I think I 100% agree with your logic there, because at some point it will just be a math equation. Essentially, we will be modeling this like a public health scenario, which is to say we have the safety data of AVs, we have the safety data of humans, we can compare the two, and when you start to model that out, you're going to look at X amount of incremental severe crashes and Y amount of casualties or severe injuries. And it's going to be pretty hard to refute those numbers and that math. And I think politicians are going to be up for a pretty difficult situation and discussion with the general public, which is to say, you either stand up for human driving rights against or in the face of all safety and traffic data in order to preserve essentially, I suppose some people view it as a constitutional right to drive, which is insane, versus death and lots of property destruction. And it'll be a really hot button topic. I agree with you on that. And I think certain cities will just follow the science and the math, and other cities will, I think, double or triple down on personal freedoms. And it's going to be really fascinating to see, how that, I think, spreads across the United States and across political lines as well, because it's a really interesting. It's going to break a lot of people's, I think, social and political norms when you have to make a decision on personal freedom versus very clear impacts on safety. I mean, I've been saying since the beginning, I think it's going to be very similar to the way we talk about guns. Very similar. And it may even play out exactly the same way as guns have in the United States, which is, of course, that guns are a widely protected and defensed right that people have. But also all of the science and the math also shows that it's probably one of the most dangerous rights that we give people here. And I think it's the same exact thing is going to shake out with driving, which is people are never going to want to give that up, even in the face of overwhelming evidence that it's insanely dangerous to manually drive a car, and you endanger other people's lives, you endanger property, you endanger city's infrastructure, you endanger yourself, your family, but people are going to, stick to that personal freedom, I think. So it should be interesting.
But I like to drive. Yeah. I love to drive.
What do your parents say about AVs?
I think they were skeptical at first, but then I forced them to come along with me in Waymos, and I think that's kind of changed their opinion. I think my mom is pretty pro AVs now after having taken a ton of Waymo rides with me. So I think that kind of reflects the general consensus or like trend that I see is people seem skeptical or like concerned, and then they take a couple rides and they realize it's like, okay, yeah, this is actually really safe and like doesn't feel weird or anything like that.
My dad said he'd rather be dead than have his right to drive taken away, which I think is going to be an overwhelming boomer sensation, because like that generation absolutely grew up around the explosion of the automobile in this country, and cars were central to all culture in the 60s, 70s, and arguably still are very central today, but less so than in the past. And so I think we'll absolutely see a generational divide on this topic. Unlike guns, I think guns have actually more of multi-generational, cross-generational framing. But to me, it feels like cars are going to be very generational in the discourse, meaning I think anyone older than pretty much Gen X is going to be very in favor of keeping the right to drive no matter what. And I think Gen Z and younger probably won't have driver's licenses. Not Gen Z, but Gen Alpha? I've got kids, 7, 5, and soon to be 1 month old in a couple months here, so newborn. And I don't think any of them will get driver's licenses. And so I think that's going to be fascinating, is you'll have an entire new generation that'll never know how to drive for the most part. Our generations, I assume you're kind of Gen Z, we're millennials / Gen X. We're on the fence, and I think it's going to be debatable within our generation of how to potentially vote on this exact subject in the future. But the generational lines, I would guess, will be really important into how the discourse unfolds. What do you think?
Do you guys not think that boomers will come around when they're like right to drive is taken away, or when they have health problems, and that all of a sudden autonomy allows them to live their normal lives when they wouldn't have been able to do so otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I feel like sometimes older people will continue to drive even when they shouldn't be, and we see pretty bad crashes where people who clearly are too old to be driving and don't have the same ability to pay attention to the road are still driving. Sometimes it's hard to convince people that they should be giving that up and letting an AV drive them. So I'm sure there's still going to be some backlash, but also, I definitely think that's a good point, that having a way to continue to have mobility whenever you shouldn't be driving anymore could potentially make some people a bit more curious to the idea of AVs.
Didn't you run into at Stanford Shopping Center at one of our Autolane zones a number of, were they blind?
Yeah. Two blind women got out of a Waymo at one of our Autolane zones in Stanford Shopping Center and talked to them for about a half hour, and it was fascinating. They had the biggest smiles on their faces when they got out of the car, and they wanted to know about everything that was going on. Of course, they couldn't necessarily understand the system that we had installed because it dropped them off right at this Autolane area. And so I was explaining to them what we were doing, and they were asking tons of questions about autonomous vehicle technology. And their take on it was that it was an absolute godsend because of the economics, so the price being a lot less, the fact that these cars come right to their house. They were saying the alternative is they had to walk down to basically a bus stop where a certain service would come pick them up from the city, and that they had to plan that out hours in advance, and that it wasn't ever on time. And they were saying that the government pays for that service, and that it's actually quite expensive and inefficient and inconvenient for them because they have to walk. I think she was saying a half mile or so to get to the place where they can get that ride. And as opposed to AVs, her questions are largely around the economics, because of course, if the economics play out the way that we all think that they will, meaning costs are going to come down by an order of magnitude. So I do believe you'll be able to get around $1 a mile, maybe less than that, as the years go on, and then you enter into an entirely new world of transportation where the prices don't even equate to rideshare or personal ownership of a car. They're getting closer to public transportation. In fact, they may even surpass the economics of public transportation for certain things.
Amazing.
And if that happens, then we've got an entirely new way of getting around, which is going to dramatically benefit especially the people who have a hard time, or whether it's due to disabilities or whether it's due to financial situations. If you can't afford it, or it's physically hard for you to use public transportation, then the promise of autonomous vehicles could actually bridge that gap and make it both affordable and convenient, which I think changes the way we move.
I think that is a perfect spot for us to wrap up today. Ethan, really appreciate you joining us, man.
Yeah, of course.
Have a fantastic summer. Good luck finishing up finals. Have a great time at Tesla, and we'll talk with you soon. That's the pod.
Thanks, Ethan.
See
Good
ya.
to see you, man.
Later, man.
Take care.